November 8th, 2023. Well, it's election day, and I think it's another disappointment overall for the Republicans. We have of course, the pro-abortion measure in Ohio passed handily, and the Bashir won the governor's race in Kentucky, and it looks like the Democrats will re retain control of the state Senate in Virginia, and who knows what else might happen there too. I'm not so sure Republicans will keep the House. Maybe they will, but that's based on preliminary stuff, and I haven't looked at it too much lately. So at any rate, Youngkin's great strategy will not work, and we have a fairly close race, I guess, in Mississippi, at least closer than it should be. Um, and as usual, overwhelmingly Democrat county is running out of ballots or something, and they're keeping the polls up late. You know, it's how Democrat counties always can't get their polls closed on time. They can't get the voting done right. Oh well, and there's always some judge who lets them do this stuff. But anyhow, so it goes. So that's kind of but overall, I think this is another disappointment for the Republicans, and probably a sign of more bad things to come. Very frustrating. And of course, the other issue I think we have now that's come out lately is this is in spite of the fact that Biden is at very low poll ratings in all these polls, and shows Trump leading all these swing states, except for, weirdly enough, Wisconsin, um, which is kind of interesting, but he was close there also. And well, so anyhow, and some people are taking some encouragement from that. However, I think there's several things to consider about that. First of all, I think that the Democrats are trying to figure out how can they get rid of Biden and get one of their new people, one of their more younger, more vibrant Democrats in as a replacement. And I guess the whole backlash among the ultra left and involving the Muslim community and everything else was being used as a vehicle, I guess, against him. I'm not sure how far that's going to go. Um, whether Biden is going to go, it looks like there's signals from the Obama camp that maybe he ought to. And so that's why I think that a lot of these polls might be sort of rigged. At any rate, if Biden turns out to not be the candidate, that might be totally different. And the other issue, which is with Trump, which I see as an issue, I can't keep bringing this up, I think, but it needs to be emphasized, is that Trump is, well, on trial in multiple venues. I mean, right now we're watching his testimony and his trial in New York, which is a civil trial, trying to take away a good hunk of his money and somehow disrupt his business organization and get rid of it. I don't know what that does. It doesn't really take away the ownership of his properties, I don't think, other than a quarter of a billion, excuse me, he'd have to come up with to pay it off or something. And the judge is a joke. Obviously, it's a sham trial. And this is what I've been saying along. A lot of these trials Trump's facing are not fair trials. I mean, by any standards, only probably the one in Miami and Florida is the only trial where at least the proceedings will be conducted in a somewhat fair manner with a judge that's somewhat fair. But the others are all set up to convict. I don't know how much impact the thing in New York will really have. I think that probably will get struck down on appeal. I'm not even, but that one's pretty flaky, and I don't know when that's going to actually happen. If it is, I suppose it will. Um, that one should be the easiest to get rid of, except again, it's in New York, a very Democrat-dominated state. Um, so that's anyway the situation as I see it. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. Subscribe if you haven't, and of course you can of course ring the bell for notifications. Yeah, so the issue here, I keep hearing this. They got one group of people that start to say things negative about Trump, and other people are saying, hey, Trump, or I won't even vote or something. Both attitudes, I think, are completely missing the point. if Trump wasn't facing this legal gauntlet, I would say the logical thing is to get behind Trump, nominate him, and elect him, because the battle it would take to remove him, if it were possible, wouldn't be worth any marginal theoretical improvement, if there is any improvement, for any other candidate. Because basically he represents, based on what he did in his term in office, a very good choice. And if he chooses to run, I guess that's the way we're going to go. But the problem with that is he is facing this legal gauntlet. It isn't going to go away. You can't wish it away, and no poll number ends it. The simple fact is he's due to go on trial on March the 4th in Washington, D.C., with under the supervision of a judge who is a hardcore Democrat, anti-Trump person who's given the harshest sentence to any of the January 6th defendants. So this person is clearly hostile. Second of all, the jury is going to be all Democrats, almost certainly, unless the prosecution totally fails in their jury selection studies. If one Republican, and remember the probability is that 93% of the jury pool will be Democrats. If one Republican by chance were to come up next for selection by simply using a preemptory challenge, they could get rid of that individual and end up with an all Democrat jury. Only a complete fiasco would let one Republican on, who probably would get cowed into voting to convict anyhow. And that's the problem. The conviction, in my opinion, in the D.C. trial on these January 6th related charges, and I don't really respect those charges. I don't respect their legitimacy. But the judge does, and they're going to go forward, and they're going to convict on them. And that should happen probably by, let's say, around April the 1st. And so I'm sitting here going, okay, I'm watching Fox News. I think I mentioned this before. And everybody's talking like this isn't a reality. And yet it is a reality. And by that time the conviction would come down, it's very likely that Trump would have won the nomination, would have secured enough delegates to actually win the nomination. And so I'm just sitting here going, this is a disaster waiting to happen, which could really lead to something that would be a catastrophe, a Democrat sweep, putting him fully in charge of the government. And now you're not going to have your two Democrat senators to block the move to end the filibuster and start adding states, changing election rules, banning voter ID, probably rigging the Supreme Court and every other thing. This is what we're really facing here, folks. And these little concerns, I mean, the most rhino that might get in there would be superior to the Democrat. I mean, it really is true. I mean, as bad as the Democrats are just absolutely horrible what they want to do. And we're looking at a one-party government which will rig systems to maintain their power. So unless some catastrophe befalls them that actually leads to surprising election results in the future election, in which they get repudiated, what's the likelihood of that happening? It hasn't happened in New York yet. Hasn't happened in California yet. Hadn't happened in Massachusetts yet. I mean, you begin to see my point. I mean, even look what happened here and just happened in Virginia. I mean, the fact is, I mean, right now the Democrats are posing a serious challenge even in the governor's race in Mississippi. Right now, it looks to me like that the Republican will pull it out, but looking at the uncounted vote in a heavily Democrat county who's kept the polls open late, I still estimate they'll fall short of what they need. But at any rate, you can see the situation here. And I think that, I mean, it seems like this complete ignorance of the facts that's going on and what's going to happen. Now, we also look at the Florida trial. That one could get delayed somewhat. I don't know how long. Would it really be after the election? Probably not. But right now, it looks like that maybe Trump will get more time to prepare. I mean, this is another trial which the judge is a Trump appointee and is trying to be fair about it. But you have to remember one thing here: that Hillary Clinton is guilty of basically the same well, not exactly the same thing, but analogous charges of similar. She also mishandled classified information. She also, worse than that, she actually destroyed the evidence in the face of a subpoena, as well as ignoring the subpoena. And this is similar to the charges on Trump, although there's no destruction of evidence charges against Trump. So in that sense, Hillary Clinton was probably even more guilty, and yet no reasonable prosecutor, according to the FBI Director Comey at the time, would ever bring the charge. And yet look what's happening here. So, I mean, basically, in a purely legal sense, if this case goes to trial, he's probably going to get convicted of something here too. There's a lot of charges. But the hope there is this jury nullification, that some Republicans will get on the jury and simply won't buy it, will think what I'm thinking about how they treated Hillary and just vote not guilty and hang the case. And that might throw the thing off of the schedule so that it couldn't be retried perhaps until after the election. Then we have the case in Georgia. Now, ultimately, I think that appeals might be successful there, but it won't be in the initial trial. Will probably go against Trump, but we don't know when that's going to be because they got to kind of dodge a couple of federal cases. I guess he can't have the trials all at the same time. He's got to be there, so maybe that'll be during the election campaign. Maybe that's the one thing that'll keep him out of prison after the sentencing in D.C. is he might have to be released to hear the state trial. I don't know what's going. I mean, but you see the absolute horrible situation we're faced with here, and yet and everybody from Trump to everybody else likes. Well, there's no problem. We're ahead in the polls. I mean, yeah, Robert Kennedy, not Jr., the original in '68 was way ahead in the polls, and well, how did that work out? An event intervened that stopped it from happening. And so my point here is not that anything violence will happen because Trump has high quality Secret Service protection, which Robert Kennedy of '68 did not have. In fact, his security was pretty missing, to say the least. What happened occurred there. But my point is that legally he's facing a lawfare attack from the Democrats, which will probably tag him with felony convictions. And I have no doubt that will convince enough independents to jump ship. And that's the problem. It isn't the hardcore Trump loyalists. They'd probably vote for him even if he was in prison. But the point is there's enough independent voters, which you need to have to win, that are not going to do that. So, at any rate, that's the way I see it. And I don't know, I guess we'll have to see what happens next. I guess the real question is if he is convicted and probably just waiting sentencing at the time of the Republican convention, will they actually go forward and nominate under that circumstance? I don't know. And if they don't, will the Trump people so blow up that they'll definitely sink it anyhow? I don't know. But this is a catastrophe I see coming that you don't hear anybody hardly talking about anywhere. And I think people need to consider it. So I'm sorry to be on such a glum note, but given the way this election came out here, this was going to be one. Remember, this is an awful election when people are supposed to be so fed up with the Democrats over everything that they're doing wrong with the high crime rates, the inflation, the border, and everything else that's going wrong. You'd think that there'd be some reaction, but in fact, look what's happening. And of course, I think Youngkin made a big mistake actually campaigning on a 15-week abortion ban. I mean, why bring up the subject? I mean, now we know it isn't going to pass, and it's not that I mean, yes, I think that'd be very reasonable to limit abortions at 15 weeks. I'm not for abortion at all, but the point I'm making at is you have to look at the art of the possible, not the desirable. I mean, and right now the Democrats have got the women so spun up on the subject. I think they're actually misinterpreting the situation that would happen under the 15-week thing, because how many people really have abortions in the 13 to 26-week period anyhow? But at any rate, that's what it is. And all I'm saying is that it looks like we're heading to a disaster, and people aren't looking at what the Democrats will do and how bad that really is if they get in full control. We nearly dodged a bullet, as I've been pointing out repeatedly, in the last Congress. We can definitely thank Sinema and Manchin for what they did there to stop that, because it was close, but it didn't happen. At any rate, I'll be posting this on Rumble and my addresses of the to my social media accounts are in the description below. Until next time, sorry to be such a downer this time.